most people, I would say, loved the initial premise of Attack on Titan because it was a cosmic horror show.
Mm-hmm.
It was a cosmic horror show about an unspeakable, unstoppable, natural force.
Starting off as like a giant monster kaiju show, then becoming a military sort of political thriller, then morphing into something else and then something else. Like every season is something different.
Was it the best ending ever? No. But was it still an extraordinary piece that will forever hold its place in the history and pantheon of manga and anime?
Absolutely.
100%. Well, hello, and welcome back to Gateway to Anime. How are you all? What's going on? We are the podcast where we try and throw open the gates to anime, whether you're new, old, returning, ever wanted to get into anime but didn't know where to start. We're the podcast for you. So, Charlie, how you going?
Pretty good. I'm wearing a very special shirt
brand.
from a dear friend of mine. Shout out to you, Connor. Thank you for this wonderful Captain Levi shirt that is very subtle. And, if anyone who can't see it, is a montage of Captain Levi. In the middle of it is him cleaning a room. And we all know how much he loves to clean things.
Love it.
Yes, on brand, for we are talking about the fact that Attack on Titan has come to an end.
What a time. What a ride.
What a ride. What a
10
ride.
years.
Those of you who've been listening to this podcast for a long time, or whether you've just come in, we've talked about Attack on Titan a lot on this show because we've been going for 3 years at the time of recording this podcast, and this show has been with us for a long time. Now, obviously, we're all old folk who have been into anime for a very long time, but it is so rare, in fact, unprecedented, really, to have a show that reaches this far into the West from Japan and be so ubiquitous and be so massively well received. Attack on Titan did something very special. It broke through into the West. Now, you could argue things like Neon Genesis, no, still very niche if you want to look at pure numbers. Briefly, One Punch Man, you could argue kind of did, but not for 10 years and only did it briefly for one season. So we have a show which has now finally come to its end. And it's quite an emotional time because Attack on Titan did something for me. And now, the number one show for me of all time, obviously my number one anime, is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. This show, for a period of time, meant more to me than that show. Now, we'll come back to this later.
Sacrilege.
At the end of the day, we'll talk. We're not going to get too bogged down in the ending. We will talk about that a bit, obviously, because we have to, of course. But this show really is something very, very special to me. And it's funny because I read the manga as well because famously the show came out in 2013. There was a 4-year gap between season 1 and season 2. So for those of us who were obsessed, you had to read the manga, but you caught up to that real quick too. Then we were dealing with month-to-month releases for 4 years or something like that too. So it's been a bit of a slog at the same time. But I just want to contextualize just how big and well received this show actually is and was in a Western context, right? So has a 9.1 rating on IMDb. Of course, you can take this with a grain of salt. There are some things I'm going to say which would be grain of salty, but still, for an anime, big deal. 9.1 on IMDb with 5 separate episodes achieving a 9.9 rating. Very hard to do. Critic score of 96% on Rotten Tomatoes to go along with a 95% audience score. Ridiculously high. But here's the thing I really want to talk about. And we'll contextualize this a bit later because one of the major benefits that Attack on Titan had was coming out at its peak when it was at its peak popularity during COVID. And I think that was a major reason as to why it managed to build such fervent and huge anticipation and such a big fan base in the West. Parrot Analytics stated that during its 4th season, which was the peak, AOT was the most popular show in the United States during the week of January 31st, 2020 to the 6th of February, 2021. The same week as its finale, it had 110.5 times the demand of the average series, an increase of 10.5% from the previous week, beating out the second place SpongeBob SquarePants by over 15%. So yeah, and that wasn't just animated show. At one point for a week in the United States, it was the biggest show in the country. That's fucking
I'm just
wild.
impressed that SpongeBob is as popular as it. Like, it's honestly.
You're going off course here.
sorry.
No. SpongeBob is what we should be talking about.
Like,
It's crazy huge.
10 years, 10 episodes. Well,
Nothing.
Yeah.
24 years of SpongeBob?
24 years, 302 episodes.
302?
Bikini Bottom going off. There's have a Broadway show. I don't see an Attack on Titan Broadway show.
There's obviously a ton of musicals in Japan.
Yeah, but I don't see a Broadway show.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
going to be like that.
Wasn't there a Death
Spider-Man.
Note? Didn't Death Note appear in London?
Yeah. So Death Note, I've talked about this, I think,
A lot.
on the podcast a bunch.
Yeah, but
But
no,
yeah, it
I never
was-
get sick of it.
Well, it was a American musical
Yes.
written for Broadway. Off Broadway, they did a workshop of it. There's a recording, and then it didn't go up. It got cancelled last minute, and then Japan produced their own one, the same one, but they did it in Japanese, obviously translated, but it was still that one. And then recently, London just did a version. It was like concert version, and it sold out like instantly.
Ross Chisari saw it.
Yeah. He was
Best
telling
thing
me,
he's ever seen.
oh, he had the best time ever.
Of course he did. So Ross, for those of you who don't know, he has been on the show a bunch of times. Check out his episodes, Magical Girl, Pokemon, and Modern Shonen. Excellent episodes. We love Ross. But we're having you on soon. He keeps asking. He lives in London now, doing Moulin Rouge on West End. So
I know Ross's
respect my
career
brother.
is going too well to be on our
He's
little
wonderful.
podcast now.
He still wants
But
to come on for some reason.
we love you, Ross.
But
We
until
love
he's on the
Ross.
Attack on Titan live musical,
Yeah, Ross.
give a
Yeah,
shit.
Aaron.
Yeah.
Ross Chisari for Aaron Yeager. Go.
Oh, I could see Eren having a high tenor.
Yeah.
And
I think
Ross has
would-
got a high tenor.
Ross would slay that. Just, we'll bankroll that for later.
Yeah,
Back that for later.
absolutely.
No, so basically, not only that, but like Reddit's obviously a very small slice of the internet and a fandom, but like there's a karma poll that comes out every week on Reddit, which is set up by, there was an amazing anime fan who basically aggregated all the karma that every episode of a show would get from its release on Reddit for 48 hours, and then would like aggregate that into a poll every week. So every week there's an anime poll of like, bam, here are the most highly rated karma episodes from the week, right? From a 48 hour
Far
period.
out.
From
What
whatever it
a
is.
what commitment.
Well, he did it for
it
years.
was so good.
Did it for years.
It was
Incredible.
So good.
Now he did leave it about a year ago, maybe, and was like, guys, I'm fucking done.
like
Fair
two-
enough. Maybe 2 years ago.
3 years ago at
Yeah,
this
but
point?
now it's now it's automated.
it's
Someone's
not as
built a
good.
bot. It's not as good. It doesn't have the same feel. But anyway, respect to that person. Absolutely
built the
crazy.
bot as well.
Come back.
But anyway, Attack on Titan just obliterated that poll. Like, it's embarrassing to put anything else close. Now, of course, you need to contextualize this again. COVID, as we said, especially when the fourth season, the one where it was the biggest show in America for a week, it came out the start of 2021. So it was a time when also anime was huge at that point because everyone was watching stuff, and it's the time that Reddit, our anime on Reddit, was out of control. It was like everyone was there talking. It was like a whole thing. So there's obviously been some benefits there that Attack on Titan managed to reap from its timing. But at the same time, you could also argue, because there was a lull. There was a big lull with because when Attack on Titan first came out,
huge.
that first season, bam, hit us all like a truck. We're like, what the fuck? This is incredible. 4-year gap.
4 years.
And there was some momentum lost.
Oh, hell yeah.
And in fact, to the point where a lot of people sort of like, oh, maybe it's not even that good. It's overhyped. Like, oh, it's operating in a vacuum. Who cares? There is a video that Gigok did called Attack on Titan is Brilliant Now, which he did in 2019 during the third season, which I still think is the peak of the show. Season 3,
That's the
part
highest
2.
rated.
is
Season
on
3
Mount.
part 2 is the
It is,
highest rated.
as it should be.
And West reviewed, and that's probably the best part of the series.
It is by far the best.
Because
part of the
it's
series.
funny because I think season 4 is where I started to miss elements of the show's earlier seasons.
Well, this is an interesting thing you say. So, anyway, if you come this far in the podcast and you don't want Attack on Titan, go listen to our earlier stuff. Like, come on. But obviously, there is a big change that happens in season 4 when the big mystery is what is in the basement is revealed, and it's like, oh, spoiler! If you haven't seen it, stop
Oh, the
listening right
spoilers.
this second. But we're going to be spoiling from
We're
here on
spoiling
in.
Attack on Titan because we're
It's
talking
ended.
about the ending and everything.
ended.
And if you haven't watched it, then I envy you. Go back and start it
Go
again.
enjoy it.
Have a great time.
So I also want to say something quickly. Obviously, quickly on the point I was just making, it changed. It was humans all along. Big change, right? That is what a lot of fans did drop off. Fair enough. We can argue about this till the cars come home, till later. And I think it is quite an interesting thing to debate. But just for context, I was reading the manga month to month, right? And the ending got savaged in the manga when it ended. People fucking hated it. I'm not talking quite Neon Genesis
So did
level,
you.
but close. I hated it.
Honestly,
hated
if
it.
you want proof of this, just go back and listen to any episode around Sam. You literally were like nearly in tears talking about it.
I hated it.
Hated it.
I hated
You
it.
came into work one night when we were working together. You're just like, it's over. Anime shit. Everyone's over. It's bullshit.
I hated it. I was
It's the worst day of my
devastated.
life. I'm like,
Yeah.
Sam, chill.
Oh,
Can't be that bad.
It was pretty bad.
was a rough
So it's interesting because I hated the ending in the manga. Fucking hated it. And again, we want to talk about Reddits. There were two Reddits at the time, two subreddits. There was Shingeki no Kyojin, which is the Japanese translation of Attack on Titan.
Titan folk.
And Titan folk. Now, this is where it gets quite funny. They went to war because Titan folk hated the ending. Shingeki no Kyojin loved the ending, and it was a war, man. And I never posted anything about it. I was just reading it, being like, this shit's wild, man. They're attacking each other. It was fucking madness. And there's even a subreddit on Reddit called Subreddit Drama, where someone goes like, hey guys, there's a subreddit drama going on. And they basically, it can be anything, Nike versus Adidas. It's not that, but just an example of like two subreddits are fighting at the moment. And this is what it's about.
Yeah.
That appeared on subreddit Drama. It got massive upvotes. It was a whole thing. It was a massive deal. So it was interesting now to see when this came out because I was like, this is going to be a dumpster fire. Everyone's going to be shitting on it. The ending has been pretty well received.
Yeah.
The ending's been pretty well received. There are those who hate it. Don't get me wrong. But quickly before we get into that, because I'm dedicated to my craft, have gone and rewatched Attack on Titan from episode 1 till the ending for this podcast. And also got my girlfriend to watch it, who is brand new to it. She's watched 2. I managed to convince her to watch 2 shows with me up to this point. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, Haikyuu, Attack on Titan. Loves all 3. Why? Because they're fucking brilliant. But again, but Grace is not an anime fan necessarily, but she loves those 3 shows. And they're 3 of my top 5 of all time, obviously. I just think it's incredibly fascinating. And I'll go into reasons why I think it's different now. I think the anime did handle the ending much better. At the time that I was reading the manga, we were all clamoring for it. So it came out very fast and it was a rushed scan and it was mistranslated. So there were some major issues there. There were some really dumb things that were said, which were just like cringe and stupid. That was a big part of it. But I also think the fact that in a month, it happened to Game of Thrones as well, which of course in our first ever season back in 2020, we did an episode with Brett, our old host, called Attack on Titan versus Game of Thrones, because it makes a lot of sense that it was so. They're very, very similar in that respect. But because it was a month-to-month release, right, people would read the manga and then we'd have a month basically just obsessing over it in Reddit forums or in Mal, talking shit out, and then basically constructing things that we were like, oh, this is what's going to happen. This is what will happen. And then you almost convince yourself that it did happen. And then when it comes out and it doesn't happen, your expectation is not met. Therefore, you have a bad response, right? And I think that was a major reason as to why so many people hated the manga, because right now, rewatching it, and also because I've seen it before and I'm looking at different things now, I actually think it's not a perfect ending. It's not Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood ending.
No, God, no.
It's not. It's not like a good ending, but it's not a disaster. It's not. I admit I was wrong.
So I think interesting with manga versus anime, and like I'm probably going to make a few enemies with this statement, but I do think that like there are certain artistic liberties you can take with anime to cover up for a manga's,
stuff, yeah.
Like shortcomings. So if you have wonderful voice acting, you have great music, you can pace things differently. In this case, like we got a movie length episode where they did go back and retcon a few things, but
They changed a few things.
not like a crazy amount from what I can gather.
They smoothed some rough edges.
Yeah, and the issue is though, and also I'd argue with the pacing with the anime too, because obviously we've made many jokes about season 1, part 3,
the final
version
season, part
5,
19,
like, blah, 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 blah. But really it wasn't as crazy as it was made out to seem. Really like final part, there was only just 2 extra long episodes basically.
Correct, yeah.
And for me, because I'm used to watching it in episodic form, I kind of prefer it I would have kind of preferred just like a longer season. And I know that for animators, Mappa in particular, we've talked about this at length.
It's Mappa.
They obviously probably didn't have that within their huge roster they've been doing, where they've been already delivering everything else for us and wonderful. And like by all accounts, I think that they did a fantastic job at these 2 final episodes. It was beautifully animated. The music, the score was great. They had a lot of stuff that they kind of threw back and made it orchestral and like
you see Big Girl came
back.
They
were clever.
That's a song, by the way.
Yeah. And I think it just But to me, I guess I think I would have probably been more hyped if it was just a season that finished it, you know?
Sure.
And when I think of the greatest anime endings of all time, the two that stand out are Code Geass and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yes.
And those two are what I would consider like some of the best endings in any fictional medium that I've ever seen in my life. And I think Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood had a challenge ahead of itself, which was that you were introduced in a similar way to Attack on Titan. There was just so many different storylines, so many things to tie up that you kind of get to the point where you're dizzy and you go, how the fuck is this going to end? How are we going to tie this off? And then that ending, unlike anything I've ever seen in my life, literally everything worked out for a reason. And like not everything's going to, I have, that's like the highest quality. I did not expect Attack on Titan to stick that landing. And I also just think that for me personally, as we said earlier, I preferred the earlier days of Attack on Titan when it was a more simple premise. I think that the last couple of seasons are quite convoluted and quite weirdly paced in a certain way where it was like, I could understand what was going on, but I found it less interesting. And I remember the whole way through, and I think you can probably find me on a recording further back, saying that the only thing I could see going to happen is that Eren Yeager's going to Lelouch himself, which is a Code Geass reference, which is where basically he sets himself up to be the ultimate villain in order to make peace. So he sacrifices himself and dies, where has someone kill his figurehead Zero, you know, to
It's a great ending
to create peace. And the way that was done was so shocking and so wonderful at the time. And it's something that's not necessarily like one that's only ever been done by Code Geass. It's quite a common thing, particularly in stories of war. But I kind of knew Attack on Titan was going to do a rendition of that, and
a poor man's version.
Yeah, but I think that Isayama, credit where credit's due. Like, you know, it's such a huge story, and it obviously captured the attention of so many people, and it really brought so many anime fans into the medium. It's quite a unique series in a lot of ways. A cast of thousands, you know. So many, and like getting new characters up until the last minute. And I think I applaud anyone who wants to create a world that big and to capture the attention of everyone. So I must say, when the ending came out, I was expecting a lot worse just because you've been so dramatic about it, and so the whole internet.
Yeah, you were the problem.
Yeah.
I was one of the bad guys.
And I wasn't, there's a couple of things that I found maybe slightly lazy in the ending. And we can talk about, as again, we're not spoiling anything, but one of the main ones to me was Ymir being in love with King Fritz.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, that was weird.
Terrible
That,
bit.
to me,
One of the big reasons we all were furious.
Yeah, I just went, that's really tacked on and
Pathetic.
made no sense. And that she related to Mikasa because
She, was also
she
like in a
eventually
Stockholm syndrome
killed
type
her love and then moved on. It didn't quite make sense for either character, I don't think.
No, it was-
And that was my main gripe with it. But, you know, I guess it's not exactly, I mean, it wasn't, and one thing I say is I saw people getting really angry about it. And I was like, it wasn't selling King Fritz and Ymir like a love story at all. It was like, it was definitely not.
That's
They
true.
were, like, it wasn't.
No,
It wasn't
no,
like,
no.
this is how, it was actually like, this is the ultimate toxic form of a power abuse
Yes.
within people. And even if you end up with godlike powers, sometimes you are
still
beholden by your own humanity or like, you know, or like your own kind of irrational. So
Because it's all she'd ever known.
exactly. Anyway, but I found that was just like really dumb.
It was
to me.
fucking dumb.
So that was my main gripe, and also that Falco could fly really
Very
easily.
convenient.
It makes sense to me.
At all.
Yeah,
Very convenient,
I
yeah.
just was like, and also Annie was just convinced immediately to come back.
And also the fact that like not one of them died in the fight. And you could argue that like Eren, you know, was holding back, didn't want to kill them and stuff. But it's like, you just killed 80% of the world, dude. The fact that and then also when they got turned into Titans at the end.
They
and
should
then-
have said Titans.
And then unturned, I was like, come on.
Well, they got rid of Titan power, so it made sense.
Yeah, but it was lame. I was like, this is the
I
story.
don't know, that makes sense to me.
It can make sense, but it's about win-loss, right? And it's the fact that like all these guys are like, yes, we lost something in this huge endeavor against a literal god who can hack time. And then all of a sudden it's like, they all get turned into Titans and they're like, oh no, don't lol, jokes. Now, of course, the ending's still bad because everyone still loses. Hate is a cycle and which will never end. That's like the overall
That's the overall
point,
messaging of the show.
Of course. Indeed. But it's
That
like,
guy and his dog finding the tree.
guy finding
I
the
was
tree
just
again.
like-
It's like, oh, hell,
Oh no, actually, I genuinely think that my favorite part of the ending was that credit sequence.
Oh, Chris is
Horrific to watch.
which I handled better because It also showed how much of a passage of time had passed until the bombing at the end, right?
Yeah.
In the manga, that they didn't make it anywhere near as clear that it was that far in the future. It was like, it felt like it was almost instant. And you're like, oh, what?
Oh, okay.
What the fuck? So
Yeah.
that was another change that they made.
Right. I mean, either way, I think that the message is clear, which is that
Hatred will forever, and people will
And it's
believe in ideals which are toxic and
it's
lie to themselves.
it's what we believe to be that this text is an anti-war text. There's people that will argue
It is an
otherwise,
anti-war
but
text.
I think that is kind of, to me, abundantly clear. In terms of narrative characterization, that kind of thing, a lot of people had issues in the manga with Eren being upset about the thought of Mikasa moving on without him and suddenly having romantic feelings for her. That didn't upset me that much. I know that he hasn't been shown to have romantic feelings towards her for this series, but I think that's because he had a lot of other things going on in his head, such as
multiple
the
timelines.
entire multiple timelines and knowing the future instantaneously for the I think what he gets that when he touches Historia's hand in season 3, right?
Yes.
Season 4, season 3? Season 3.
End of season 3.
Yeah, so that is years in a timeline.
Yeah.
There's a time skip, everything. So like his character's been somewhat, and he's not able to have. I think it was kind of nice to see Eren for the last time have a human moment with Armin, even though it was kind of out of the blue and a bit weird.
Yeah.
I think for him to say, and for Armin to be like, that was really pathetic, what you just said then, was kind of funny. But I was just like, it to me, I genuinely, I didn't mind seeing him as someone, as he says, I'm just an idiot who got this power.
Yeah.
And that
That's
showed.
true.
Like he's not some mastermind, like he's not actually.
It wasn't Erwin who got the power.
Yeah,
Who
it was-
should have instead of Armin. But
No, I mean the point of that was that he was grateful that he didn't in the end. I mean, there's a lot of things that went wrong in that series, and it was but I think as a whole, just it's interesting to see something like this end now. And I think that we've had like Naruto end and Bleach is still going, so and One Piece will go
manga's
forever
ended,
more.
yeah.
But in terms of like big markers of anime's ending, Attack on Titan was one that, as gateway to anime, it really has a lot of fans who are not even that into anime. It just really transcended any kind of genre. I think people really responded to the storytelling, really responded to the characters and the style of the show. And I think that it's something that we're probably not going to see for another decade or so in show form. I mean, Jujutsu Kaisen is really popular.
yeah, but it's not this. Not,
And
not
Demon
Naruto.
Slayer, I think, probably
Demon
closer,
Slayer's-
actually.
Look, but you could argue that Attack on Titan enabled those shows to be so.
Yeah.
Because also
well,
the other thing about Attack on Titan is that it is set in a Western-esque context. It's a European-style medieval world. Both Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer are very Japanese. Now, it doesn't mean they're both set in Japan, one of which is set in modern day, the other one in the Taisho period. But again, that's something that a lot of people are like used to seeing Japanese stories told in. It's a late samurai, it's a late Meiji period. And it's just incredibly interesting that I think those shows would not be able to be as successful as they are without Attack on Titan.
About the audience and the fervor.
The amount of people I've met who are like, oh, I love Attack on Titan, who just I would never expect and never talk to me about any form. It's purely anecdotal, obviously. The amount of anecdotal evidence I have of people just loving this show who have no interest in anime whatsoever otherwise. Second to none. Second to none.
I don't know if I really agree with the concept that Attack on Titan was popular. I think it got people into anime for sure, but I think it hasn't. The way of storytelling is actually more kind of closer to things like Game of Thrones, that kind of thing that we like. A lot of Westerners like consuming, whereas Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer are more on the traditional shonen path of like power systems, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
whereas
they're
Attack on
proper
Titan,
animes.
I think the real strength of it was what made it unique at the very start. Obviously, it became something more than that. It was just the bad guys were very unique. The Titans, when they were
world
just
was
like
pretty unique.
the world build, the thing was unique. It was just sort of like this relenting over oppressive force that is
It was
coming
the ant
in.
under the boot.
The style of that, the way they were drawn, the way like it was very unique.
Yes, I think most people, I would say, loved the initial premise of Attack on Titan because it was a cosmic horror show.
Mm-hmm.
It was a cosmic horror show about an unspeakable, unstoppable, natural force. It was the ant under the boot, and it was like, no matter how much we plan, we can never stop this seemingly endless, unendingly powerful force of nature. Which I think is what got so many people in.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, I would also then argue that his turn, when you discover the basement, is in many ways quite genius.
Oh, that's great.
It's quite a genius turn, and I think he actually pulls that off. Yeah. And when you go to Mali and you change narrative again, you change who the focus of the characters. We meet Falco and Gabby, and we see Reiner and everything, and we go, oh, and it contextualizes. But then I think the show's always been an anti-war text. Of course, there are many pro-militaristic aspects of that, but I think if you really want to drill down into what this is that nations are militaristic. And you can make a show about the military and be anti-militaristic, because I think most of them are.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to
Full
find.
Metal Jacket is as anti-war a film as it gets, and it's a classic war film. Apocalypse Now, Unforgiven, one of my favorite films, is one of the most classic examples of an anti-violence film, but it's one of the most unceremonious, violent films you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And it's just quite obvious to me that the whole idea of like this sense of nationalism and like Erwin, who is my favorite character in the show, who is one of my favorite characters in all anime, in all fiction, full stop, an undisputed king, if you will, which this show obviously is a fascinating example of a character who is so driven by ideals, but also selfishness simultaneously, is an extraordinary character who's willing to put his humanity aside to push his goal and his people further. And we see this madness all the time throughout history, and we see what an effect it has on him. I think he's a wonderfully nuanced, fascinating character, and I think this show is more anti-war than people will give it credit for, because for me, it's about the futility and the madness and the cyclical nature. And I think even though I agree that the show is never as good as it was when it was a cosmic horror show, I still think his ambition, and now seeing it again from all the way through to the end, which I strongly suggest doing, by the way, I think his ambition, he doesn't quite pull off his ambition, but I admire him for trying.
When I said that the show got convoluted for me, that kind of thing,
does.
I meant like in terms of just pacing and things like that. Obviously, I think that it's very clear, and I think it's even from the start when it was a cosmic horror, I think it was really obvious what was actually going on, because Isayama had planned that. Of course.
You see it in
there's
the
hints.
rewatch.
In the rewatch, everything, like there was always like, to me, it was very clear that it was going to turn out the Titans were actually humans. And that happens, but I'll still never forget moments, like season 2, I've talked about this a lot, where you have Bertolt and Reiner just casually saying to Eren, oh, by the way, I'm the Colossal Titan. Moments like that are genius twists and are so fantastic. But I think finding out was in the basement, of course, it all made sense to me. That was great. But I don't know in terms of narrative pacing whether that was the strongest part of the series at the end.
It's when the paths come into it that it starts to get complex.
Yes.
Because once you start fucking with timelines, once you start fucking with like real complex, like it turns into a power system. You know what I mean? And it's super complex. And you're like,
did love that episode though, where you find out about Ymir and then you see Eren standing next to his dad. Iconic. Like that was one of the best moments in the whole series.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. You came here to do a thing.
Yeah. And you realize.
And the voice actor of Grisha Yeager, the Japanese voice actor, deserves so much credit when he's like freaking out about murdering them all. And he's like, I did it. Are you happy now? And then he goes and sees Zeke. And he finally sees Zeke, and Zeke cries. It's there. Look, the amount of oh fuck moments in the show. Okay, I fucking love Attack on Titan, man. I've been watching this whole thing from the start again. Like, and even though it has its flaws, I still think on its whole, the sum of all of its parts is quite brilliant. And to have the effect that it had in the West is undeniable. And yes, I don't love the ending still. It's way better, and I'm way less upset than I was. But I think this show deserves its place in the top echelon of all animes, and it's done something undeniable. It has brought people who are not fans of anime into the world. It's been a gateway to anime, which this whole fucking show is all about. So for that, I'll forever be grateful for Attack on Titan. I'm really sad that it's gone. And do I wish it could have been better? Sure, but you can't always get what you want.
All right, I want to ask you this. So which character do you think had the most satisfying arc, and who do you think had the least satisfying arc? Who do you think was a bit of a wasted character first, and then who do you think was
a wasted character? Mickey. Mickey was the coolest character ever.
The sniffing guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But no, his death was great though.
It was good. I just wish I had more of him to feel that more.
See, I think my wasted character is probably Armin. I just feel like towards the end they
fucked him. They fucked him.
Yeah, I don't know. And it was tough because obviously to have a character that's literally saved in place of another beloved character. I think it was worth necessarily do so for the narrative, of course. And I'm not necessarily think like even if a character like I think that I actually really enjoyed the storyline of Reiner was one of my favorite arcs.
Isayama's two favorite characters, Jean and Reiner.
They're my two favorite characters as well.
There you
Absolutely.
go.
So, but I think Armin like could have been really interesting, but I think that maybe didn't live up to their potential. But even and also like didn't do really anything, and it kind of that to me was a disappointment because it was a very big build up, and I think that like everyone else who was a part of the scouts, that kind of everyone like even Sasha,
moments.
like everyone had their moments and stuff. And,
Hanji.
yeah, and it's a shame.
I agree, actually. I mean, like, Mickey, I think, was a wasted character in respect that he was so built up and so cool and did nothing. But if you want to talk about, like, how integral to the plot they were built up to be and how they spoke, he kind of did have his moment with Eren at the end.
Well, technically, but
he didn't
like,
do fucking anything. And he was so passive during that whole period back on Paradise, so passive, did nothing, had very little plans to stop Eren apart from let's fly over the top of him and attack him, like wasn't great. And especially it's like, oh, he's the whole build up of like, oh, he's Erwin's replacement. And like he has to be, and he, of course, the big part of that, but he wasn't. And he admits it. He's like, I'm never going to be him. I can't be him. But even so, he was horribly wasted, yes.
Did Zeke change his tune way too quickly though with Armin? Because Armin did convince Zeke to help them out in the sands at the
at the end it all just got real rushed and
Yeah.
sloppy. Like it was pretty Slopsville.
Yeah, it's not, but it wasn't like, again, I think I was expecting just like me to be standing there with a cigarette going, what the hell was that? Like, and I think, but actually I was just like, yeah, I think that was probably the ending I would have expected from this show. I don't think I could see it really panning out any other way.
He painted himself into a bit of a corner.
Like, obviously this show is not going to have a happy resolution, and I think it is horrific ending. But I couldn't really see another way out of that narrative from Isayama. So I wasn't surprised by the ending at all. I think a lot of people in the manga seem to be, as you said, it's like they, similar to when we were talking about us with MF Ghosts, like people create their own. So we talked about last episode, we talked about how we got excited for an anime that we just like pretended, we had no idea anything about and just wrote our own version. And then it turned out it just like didn't fucking exist. So it's like you have your own fanfic about this stuff, and it happens with manga. It happened with Game of Thrones as well.
It did.
Everyone had like the coolest theories that like would have been like, and they're like quite convincing. But these authors are only human, and I think that he tied it up in a way that it seems the anime fan base have accepted the ending and have liked it a lot more than the manga fan base.
Time.
I'm kind of like, I'm not like, again, it's not a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood ending, and it's not a Code Geass ending, but it ended. So.
And it was okay. Wasn't Game of Thrones bad?
No, it didn't like completely.
Wasn't Game of Thrones bad?
Yeah, but it wasn't amazing.
No, it wasn't. It was slightly. What do you think, Graham? So we've been, the Devonport's been monologuing.
You guys talk away. I'm gonna get over here. I don't give a shit.
What do you think?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I just enjoyed it. I was kind of glad it was over.
Yeah,
that I wasn't gonna have to wait for another part or something to happen. I was expecting more from Eren than I'm just kind of dumb and this is the best idea I had. But then at the same time, I was like, oh yeah, he is dumb and this is what a dumb person would do. But I enjoyed it just to be done with it. I was ready for it to be done.
Yeah, I agree. It was time for Attack on Titan.
It was. But I mean, it was a significant show for you two in your anime journey, right?
I think starting off as like a giant monster kaiju show, then becoming a military sort of political thriller, then morphing into something else and then something else. Like every season is something different.
Don't forget when it was a Western with Kenny and Levi.
Exactly.
One of the great sequences. Also put Studio Wit on the map. It was their first ever show. Ridiculous.
Was the Kenny Levi sort of ODM gear better than his ending sort of scene when he's slicing through? It's the same sort of thing they're going for.
Whoa. Actually, what is your favorite sequence in Attack on Titan?
It probably is that ODM Kenny chase.
The Kenny chase?
But I think that, just saying Kenny's great. But that last scene with him, he's like, I've got no fucking legs or arms or whatever it was. Even when he killed Zeke, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
He finally finished his mission. The thing that he's never failed a mission, and he did it.
Yep.
Even though I was like, oh, he's helping him out. Oh, he's dead.
Yep. He promised Erwin he'd do it.
And he did it.
And he did it.
He did it.
And my favorite sequence from Attack on Titan is also another Levi moment, because it was the thing where they obviously saved the budget for the Levi cool moments. It's a tie between Levi versus the female Titan, and
Underrated.
also Levi versus the Beast Titan when the throwing of the rocks, and also that whole sequence with Erwin screaming.
That's probably the best scene in
best in the
anime
whole.
ever, probably.
Yeah,
That's my favorite sequence of anime, and I think I've watched it on YouTube like 5,000 times.
There's
the final Erwin speech.
You've seen that TikTok where it's the little girl on the rocking horse?
Oh my god, it's so
and they put that Erwin speech on the back, and she's just going hell for leather on this rocking horse.
so good.
While her mum talks about shampoo in the front.
the funniest
so
thing.
good.
I haven't seen that, but I need to
very,
see
very
it.
So
good.
good.
That's
She's
cool.
just so intense. Just
It's the most intense thing ever.
and her mum's like recommending shampoo
See how
on
it's
TikTok.
gonna.
And in
Yeah.
the back, it's just Erwin. It's fucking gold.
Yeah.
That's that followed by, and like when Grace was watching it, my partner as well, like when Levi, because we watched it back to back, when Levi took down Zeke, she was like, yes! Like,
it's so satisfying.
It's so iconic, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'll always forever hold a place in our hearts. And it's been so special to have something that, we're all anime fans. Like we've all been massive anime fans since we were kids.
Yeah.
And to actually have something that has hit the mainstream like this.
Where you can talk to someone and be
Yes.
not feel like such a nerd.
Exactly.
Not the fucking creepy weirdos like, oh my god, things.
Yeah, right?
It's actually a cool kid again.
Yeah.
So-
It was cool.
That was cool. One.
Attack on Titan was cool.
Yeah.
And like, because you obviously, when did you start watching it? Were you
when it
in,
first aired.
in Vancouver?
Must have been 2013. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think it was 2013.
Before I started traveling. So yeah, must have been.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's been probably since I left home. So it's probably been traveling with me
I think it's
Literally.
2012.
on the journey.
But yeah.
It's either late 12. Anyway, it was
Around
at its
then.
peak in 13. Like in 14, it was like that was when it was. Yeah, and then it came back again in 2017.
It definitely was one of the only anime I was watching at that time as well. Like, I think it would have got me back into.
Is this during your I hate anime series?
No, I was still kind of on board. There was like soon after. It was during the hiatus of season 1 and 2 where I fell off anime entirely.
Yeah.
And I was back on board by the time season 2 came back around. So
Yeah, incredible.
maybe not a coincidence there. Maybe I was just waiting for Attack
Just
on
waiting
Titan.
to come back.
Waiting
That
for it.
wait was fucking painful.
That's why I
my
read the
God.
manga.
And
I
I
had
didn't read
to.
the manga. I didn't do it. I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm waiting this out, because I think for an action show like that, and Isayama is an incredible mangaka, incredible drawer and everything. I'm sure that it's like manga readers don't get mad at me, but I just think for a really action-based, like for having such an amazing animated treatment of it, I think I didn't want to spoil the surprises for myself, because I think it maybe this story is best told in animated form.
That's why I don't read Spider-Man comics, yo. Some things are just meant to be seen in
Emotion.
action.
And there's
Yeah.
also one guy who did the 3D maneuver gear animation exclusively almost. And I can't remember. I should have written his name down. I was meaning to, but he is, I'll put it in the show notes actually, but he is responsible. He went over from Wit to Mappa to do the 3D animation sequences. He did that final sequence that you're talking about at the end there with Levi on his own.
Madness.
He did the Beast
Pure
Titan
madness.
sequence on his own. Like wild. Absolutely
He's
wild.
got horrible carpal tunnel from like years of just ODM gear animation. Just
Man, but to make that his thing and just like because the ODM gear animation is iconic.
Yeah.
It's out of control. It was pretty much one guy. I mean, a Sakaga guy might correct me on that, but it's like not all of it was by himself, but like many sequences he did on his own. He was the key animator for those sequences. Extraordinary stuff. Just wild.
The ODM gear, just in general, I liked how unique that was, and just how it's how humans would think to battle these, like, kind of, and it's very cool with the two blades and the spinning, and like it's just very, very
When they
cool.
go to the guns for the
Yeah.
anti-personnel gear,
When they get more technologically advanced as it goes along, but I think
thunder spears.
it's a cool show filled with many, many great characters, and I'm sad to say goodbye to them. But also, I think it was time as well. It's been a decade, and I think that
Plus, we'll get a sequel. We'll get a follow-up. We'll get something.
He's released
100
something in
years.
April 2024.
There you
go.
Levi,
The Boruto of fucking
a pre-Levi
Attack on
story.
Titan.
Sweet. Well, I mean, I'm on board
pre-Levi?
for that then.
More of his like, underground times, I think.
Great. I'll watch that. When he stole the ODM gear and
I
was
think
good with
it's
them.
around that period, yeah.
Yeah.
Before he meets Erwin and stuff.
It's gonna be like a chibi version of Levi.
There is-
high school version.
There is that. Have you
There
not
is
seen
that. I know it exists.
Yeah, it's a Attack on Titan high school chibi show. I'm not even kidding.
God,
That's a
damn.
thing.
I missed that.
Don't know. You can go watch
Probably
it.
not.
watch that.
There you
It's
go.
out there.
If you want to fill
Do you
the
want some more
hole that
time?
Attack on Titan has left. So bizarre. Yeah. So, what do you think is the next big hit? I mean, we're probably not going to see one for about a decade. But what do you think is going to be the next big anime hit?
There's a new manga which has only had a few volumes out right now called Kuburabashi, which is essentially, I've only glanced over it, but everyone was losing their minds when the first, and it's too early to tell.
First chapter was really good.
Explain Kuburabashi, please.
So it takes place after a sort of Indonesia, what do you call that sort of Indonesia sort of region? We'll say Indo-Asia war. But the hero of this sort of the war was this blacksmith who made katanas that were, imbued with magical powers and abilities. He has a son. The father's killed by sort of the Yakuza, and it's a revenge tale of his son picking up these magical swords to go kill Yakuzas, but there's magic involved and stuff like that. It's pretty hype.
Cool.
I've heard that's amazing, but like it'll be something we probably hasn't even been made yet if it's not Kuburabashi. So I don't know.
I feel like Chainsaw Man had that hype, but maybe
did, but
didn't
didn't
necessarily
land it.
translate to as big an audience as Attack on Titan. To be fair, less. I think
Less relatable.
less. Yeah.
And like leans into some of the more, without sounding too judgmental, creepy aspects of what people can attribute to manga and anime. You know what
It's
I
a
mean?
different kind of adult as opposed to
and also it's
like-
unhinged.
Yeah.
It's fucking unhinged.
It's unhinged.
Like, which is why it's cool.
It hasn't even begun to become unhinged yet.
Yeah, which is why it's cool, but it's also why I don't think it's going to have mass appeal.
Mm.
It's too weird. You know what I mean? Like, whereas AOT is fucking brutal, but it's not weird. It's not creepy. No fan service. Fuck all fan service in AOT. Anyway, thank you so much, Attack on Titan. You'll be missed. Hajime Isayama, you are a genius, and you will always have my admiration, even if at the time I hated your ending in the manga. I've come around because people grow. People change. Was it the best ending ever? No. But was it still an extraordinary piece that will forever hold its place in the history and pantheon of manga and anime?
Absolutely.
100%. So that is our little look into the impact of Attack on Titan. What a ride it's been. Thank you so much. We are Gateway to Anime. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube, and on social media, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok. Check it out. If you really like what we do, you can find us on Patreon. Really appreciate any help we can get. We're a small little operation, but we're working hard to bring you the best content we can. Patreon.com/Gateway to Anime. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And just a little moment. Favorite character, go.
Levi.
I already said Reiner.
Reiner is.
Reiner, yeah.
In the end? Okay. Erwin.
I mean, and he's not I'm not like everything he did was great, but I think he's a fascinating character.
Agreed.
Levi. He's badass and he's about this tall.
Levi, yep. That's
Yeah,
the
you know
episode.
what? Yeah, sorry, Levi. Yeah.
Erwin. All right. Well, we'll catch you all next time. Thank you so much. See you soon.